A feather that should be easy to find for a tail is a partridge feather. Get these in a bag and just sort of sort them out. The material that I've stroked away to the left is not really useful for this fly, other than if I made it into a one feather fly, which I may do. And then I like to pull out just the very tip, what will break out, and then stroke about, half of these fibers back like so, and the tips that remain here, I'm going to just turn them over, will be our tail. We're going to measure the tail from the front of the eye to the point of the hook, and then we move that spot back to where our thread is and just tie it in. Now I'm using rusty thread here, 6/0 thread. Once I tie this in, somewhere about where we had our little knot, or about the halfway point, we're going to just clip this off. Then I have some black brassy wire. Brassy is the diameter of the wire, and I'm going to build this body out of a wider thread. So I make a couple wraps up here to start that process, and this thread is called 210 denier rusty brown. We could use an olive or some other color. Now we want a thin taper at the back, and we want this to taper forward. So there's one wrap back, but I didn't go all the way to where I was. Here's a second wrap back, just to the point of the hook and forward. I think that's pretty good for a small nymph like this. That should do. Then I'm going to just move the floss forward. You can see it builds bulk quickly, and I'm going to restart just my rusty 6/0 Danville over it. Clip those out as I did before, and that's a pretty quick process all in all. And I reverse wrap the wire so it doesn't interfere with my tail, and make even wraps through this body. When I'm at the halfway point, then I make adjacent wraps. In this case, I'm going to move those forward a little bit because it'll add also a little weight to the fly underneath the thorax area. And as you can see, as I tie it back, I'm pulling the wire back and then up like this. And I always cut my wire way back in my scissors. It's going to have a segmented effect, and I think that'll stand out when this fly is in the water. Another material that's readily available, we'll use it for our wing case on this. I like having wing cases on my mayflies, is a turkey feather. This is just one turkey tail feather, very long, and I've treated it with a little bit of, honestly, hairspray, so the material sticks together. I just spray it, and then I take my fingers and rub the wetness through to flatten everything out. It has a top, which is the darker part that's not as shiny as the bottom. When I turn it over, you can see it's very shiny. It's not from the hairspray. It's because the feathers are naturally shiny on the part that's against the skin of the bird, and darker and duller when it's away from their skin. So I have this piece of feather that I've trimmed out, and we can see the shiny side here and the dark side here. This is where I clipped it away from the skin, and that is wider than it is near the tip that was away from the stem. So I'm going to turn it over so that my narrow part is forward and the shiny side is towards me, and just clip a little bit off. Then I lay this down and hold it with my thumbnail like this, turn it a little bit, and you can see it's angled towards me so that when I make a wrap of thread, it rolls it around and to the top. And then what I do is pull back on the turkey and lift up, and we want to go so that we'll have a smooth transition from our abdomen into the thorax. Now I may have gone back a little too far. Again, well, so I'll undo it, thinking that I might have. Was I in the right spot right there? That looks a little bit better. And we just want a smooth transition. Now in this case, we could use peacock, which is readily available, and we will use it on some flies, or we could use a piece of ostrich herl. Now the ostrich herl has a V. The herl comes off of the stem at an angle on each side. And down the middle of this feather is its stem, which leans forward. When we wrap ostrich, we want that stem to go forward. So we'll tie this in by the cut part that I've arranged there, move our thread forward to cover up our material that we use for the wing case, the turkey, and then when we pull this up, the stem should go to the front when we begin to wind it. And you see that it has. The herl is back, the stem is forward. This is also true of peacock, but most of the time we get peacock herl in strands that are strung together. Now it's slipped down the little thread ramp there, but still the fly will be okay. And I'm just going to tie that off at the back of the eye of the hook, and then I wrap back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wraps to define where the head is on this. Now the ostrich looks a little unruly here because it's long. We can measure ostrich based on the plume that we have. In this case, I don't really care because it's going to have action with this, and when it's wet, it really will lay down quite a bit. Now at this point we could add legs. We'll do that on our next pattern. I'm going to move my thread back forward to the eye, and then I go underneath what material is left and around under the eye with just a couple wraps, and there's just a little bit of herl sticking up there. It's not enough to even really see. Then I pull the wing pad over. You can see that lays this material down. As I tie it off, again, it's going to want to roll with the thread and push away. So when I put my thread on, I pull over on the wing pad material in my right hand, make that first wrap and check it out. It's right on the top. And once we have the position here, we'll wrap our thread back again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wraps to define the head. And there's a couple ways of doing this. One is to pull the wing pad back over and tie it down again here, which will reinforce it. I don't think that's necessary on this fly. So what I'm going to do is use the eye of the hook as a guide and just clip this. And there's enough left here that I could tie another fly. It's now wider than the first one. While I'm thinking about it, I would just take a little bodkin, which is always at the ready, and strip out a couple of the strands of turkey material, pull those away. These are getting thrown out, and now I have the right width again for another wing pad. I always like to flatten my thread just a little bit. Start at the back of the eye and whip finish to the back of the head, like so. And my thread got caught on something, but you can see I got it to go through. And I always check it by pulling the thread parallel like this to the hook shank. And then I put my thumbnail against the back of the eye and pull on it even a little bit harder just to make sure it's snug. And then when we clip it off, we just clip it close without cutting any feathers or other material that we might have. So this is a basic mayfly nymph that would work very well for pale morning duns that we have where I live and fish mostly in Colorado mountains and in the west. Obviously make adjustments to this coloration based on the bugs that are observed in the stream where you're fishing. And that's how I've learned how to fly fish and tie flies, is by observing.